Good afternoon. We're back with another episode of the Lord of the Rings LCG Progression Series, and today is a lore and quest guide for Peril in Pelargir, first quest of the Heirs of Numenor expansion. The White Council has sent you by ship to Gondor to help fight the threat of Mordor. Upon arrival in the port city of Pelargir, you are greeted by Lord Alcaran, who takes you to the Leaping Fish where you can speak privately. So, if you recall, the last story quest before taking a break for the Hobbit saga was Shadow and Flame, located in the eastern part of Moria. This quest, Peril in Pelargir, is located far to the south in the port city of Pelargir, located on the map here, to the southwest of Minas Tirith and west of Mordor. So, inside the tavern, Lord Alcaran looks nervously toward the door as he hands you a scroll bearing the seal of Gondor. He asks that you deliver it to Faramir in Ithilien, but the brigands who just entered look intent on taking it from you. Ithilien is located here, North Ithilien and South Ithilien. This is where Frodo encountered Faramir in the Two Towers, as Frodo and Sam had proceeded through Emyn the Dead Marshes, to the Black Gate, but had decided instead to go through Ithilien and down to Minas Morgul, which is where in Ithilien they encountered Faramir. So we're asked to deliver a scroll from Pelargir to Faramir, presumably located somewhere in Ithilien. But first, someone is intent on taking the scroll from us. During the fight in the tavern, one of your adversaries managed to grab Alcaran's scroll and flee outside. You chase the thief into the street where you are surrounded by a gang of his fellow brigands. You must fight your way through the mob and recover the scroll. You've recovered the scroll, but are still outnumbered by your determined foes. Lord Alcaran shouts for you to escape and deliver the scroll before he flees to summon the city guard. If you can get to your ship, you can escape the clutches of these desperate thugs. So, this quest is the first instance of battle questing in the game so far. This is a mechanic that's not used that often after this cycle. In fact, I'm not sure if it's used at all after this cycle. Battle questing simply means when you see the battle trait on a quest, it means instead of using your willpower, you use your character's attack. Often in these quest cycles, they'll require you to use a combination of things depending on where you're at in the quest. For example, in this quest, the first two phases are battle, and then the final phase is normal, which means you need to build a deck that is capable of putting out some willpower and a deck that's capable of battling, and that is not easy from a deck building standpoint, to build a deck with a true dual focus. Usually when it comes to questing, your only focus is willpower. Forcing you to focus on both willpower and battle at this point in the game's life cycle adds quite a bit of difficulty, and as such, the Heirs of Numenor expansion and the corresponding cycle of adventure packs are quite challenging relative to the Dwaro Delph cycle, which had its challenging quest, but I would consider it well balanced. The Heirs of Numenor is difficult at times, and you don't get a lot of help from the player cards. For the setup for this one, you search the encounter deck for the Leaping Fish and Alcaran's Scroll. The Leaping Fish is the active location. It requires 6 progress points to clear, and if Alcaran's Scroll is attached to a hero, the Leaping Fish gains at the beginning of the quest phase, discard X cards from the top of the encounter deck, where X is the number of players. So in a solo game, you're discarding 1 card from the top of the encounter deck at the beginning of the quest phase, and if it's an enemy, it gets added to the staging area. Alcaran's Scroll does start the game attached to a hero. So the Leaping Fish is going to start the game with this ability, possibly adding 2 enemies to staging. If you get one from the encounter deck during the normal staging step, you may possibly get 2 enemies per round while the Leaping Fish is active, so it is important to clear the Leaping Fish as quickly as you can. This is a challenge frequently seen in quests. I would call it a wall, an early game wall that you have to get over, where you have some obstacle in the staging area or in the active location that needs to be cleared ASAP, because otherwise it will escalate the difficulty even further the longer it is allowed to remain in the game. For Phase 1, when revealed, each player must search the encounter deck for a copy of Harbor Thug. So in a solo game, you would start with 1 Harbor Thug, which is a 2/3/1 enemy. And when the player whose hero has Alcaron's scroll attached raises his threat, Harbor Thug engages that player, which means you don't have the option of sneaking past him with a low threat deck. He's already got pretty low threat, so that's not much of an option with most decks anyway. Phase 1 only requires 6 progress to clear, but it does have to be battle questing. So, challenge number 1. Alcaron's scroll will start attached to a hero, and challenge number 1 is to clear the active location, the Leaping Fish. You have 2 threat to start, possibly more if you get a character from the encounter deck or an enemy from the encounter deck at the beginning of the quest phase, and then whatever you get from the encounter deck during the staging step, so possibly facing the need to do 12 progress on round 1, which probably isn't going to happen. If you get lucky, then maybe only 10. Also probably not going to happen, though it is possible with some deck builds, depending on how heavily you focus on battle questing. You can possibly clear the Leaping Fish round 1. Once you clear the Leaping Fish, as usual, you'll want to clear the staging area before advancing to Phase 2. And in Phase 2, it is again battle questing, and you cannot advance to Stage 3 unless Alcaron's scroll is attached to a hero. And when revealed, you attach Alcaron's scroll to the highest engagement cost enemy in play, if able, otherwise added to the staging area. So, when you advance to Stage 2, whichever hero is holding Alcaron's scroll is going to drop it. And that is relevant because you can't advance without it in your possession, and in order to regain possession of it, you have to kill the enemy that's guarding it, if any, and you have to exhaust a hero, which is the more annoying part of this, is that you have to exhaust a hero to reclaim it. So you have to kill an enemy, all the enemies that you need to, make all the progress that you need to, but without the use of all of your heroes, or with an unexpected courage on one of them or something like that, so that you can pick up Alcaron's scroll and attach to and advance to Phase 3. Alcaron's scroll will also be dropped anytime the hero holding it is damaged by an enemy attack. In Phase 1, anytime the player whose hero, well, actually not just in Phase 1, but anytime the player whose hero has Alcaron's scroll in a true solo game that's only one player raises his threat, Harbor Thug engages that player. Once you have control of Alcaron's scroll and you have advanced, made the 13 battle progress that you need, advance to Phase 3. When revealed, each player searches the encounter deck and discard pile for 1 enemy. So again, it's important to clear the staging area if possible before advancing to Phase 3. And in Phase 3, enemies cannot be optionally engaged. So if you are at low threat, they're just going to hang around in the staging area. Thematically, this is because the party is running away from the enemies in an attempt to escape the city. And the first enemy revealed from the encounter deck each round makes an immediate attack against the player who controls Alcaron's scroll. from the staging area. Once again, you need to control Alcaron's scroll to end the game and make 15 progress, normal questing progress. So hopefully the setup is sufficient at this point that your battle questers also have some willpower so that they can make the 15 progress you need to escape. You need Alcaron's scroll on a hero who's not going to be taking a lot of damage, because if he does take damage, he's going to drop the scroll and you're going to have to exhaust the hero to pick it up again. Let's take a look at the encounter deck. If you haven't played this quest before and you've been watching and thinking this doesn't sound too difficult, this isn't one of the harder quests of this expansion. The other two are harder. However, this quest can be very annoying, and one of the reasons is the cards that the encounter deck throws at you. Zealous Traitor, when he engages a player, that player must deal 1 damage to each ally he controls. 2, if Zealous Traitor was not optionally engaged. 1 damage to each ally you control can be a very big deal. And he's only got 17 threat, which means you're not going to be able to control whether you engage him or not. If you get 2 of them, you can only optionally engage 1 enemy per round. That would mean 3 damage to each of your allies in that round, and that's a big deal. And in Phase 3, if this enemy is revealed, you can't optionally engage enemies in Phase 3, so he's going to do the 2 damage to each ally. Pickpocket. When Pickpocket attacks, the defending player discards 1 resource from each of his heroes' resource pool and 1 card at random from his hand. That's quite annoying. When this attachment goes on one of your heroes and the hero with the highest threat cost, when attached hero exhausts, readies, or triggers an ability, raise its controller's threat by 1. Can be quite annoying. Return all brigand enemies engaged with players to the staging area. Lossernach Bandit. When Lossernach Bandit engages a player, that player discards 1 resource from each of his heroes' resource pools. 2 instead if Lossernach Bandit was not optionally engaged. Combined with the Pickpocket, this can really limit your resources. One of the reasons why this cycle is difficult is that a lot of the cards are designed to inhibit what you're trying to do. They're not designed to be powerful in their own right. None of these enemies are especially powerful in terms of their stats. They're just designed to try and stop you, the player. And that can be quite annoying. So multiple ways from the enemies to discard your resources. Your cards deal damage to your allies. When Umbar Assassin engages a player, that player must deal 3 damage to a hero. Discard that hero instead if Umbar Assassin was not optionally engaged. You may have noticed that this card is 40 threat. That is a formidable card with 4 threat, 5 attack. If you're over 40 threat and you can't control whether this enemy engages you or not in Phase 3, he'll kill a hero. And this encounter deck has a few ways that it will try to raise your threat. For example, collateral damage. Discard 2 cards from the top of the encounter deck. 2 additional for each copy of collateral damage in the discard pile. Then raise each player's threat by 2 for each location. Also, local trouble can cause your threat to go up. So those can combine with the Umbar Assassin, who's only a 1-of in the deck. But nonetheless, if he does come up and kills a hero, you may just lose, which can be quite annoying when you're already in Phase 3. However, that being said, overall, this quest has some annoying mechanics, but it's the easiest of the 3 in this expansion, which is quite a difficult expansion. Any deck with a reasonable focus on battling and a secondary focus on willpower should be able to get the job done. This does not require a specialty deck. If you are struggling, one of the ways that's very common to struggle on this quest, one of the parts of this quest that it's very common to struggle on, is the initial wall. And that's usually the cause is not having enough attack on your heroes. One hero that I really like is Bjorn. With his 5 attack, he's very powerful at questing in this one. In fact, I think I ran Bjorn, Boromir, and Glorfindel. So 2 battle questers and 1 normal quester who could also battle quest. And so with all 3 of those heroes, I was questing for 8-11 on turn 1 if I wanted to, which could clear the Leaping Fish on round 1. I believe in my playthroughs, my strategy was to quest with all 3 characters for 11, attempt to clear the Leaping Fish on round 1, and then ready up Boromir using Boromir's ability in order to tank the attack from the Harbor Thug and then worry about defeating him in subsequent turns. But turn 1 I quested with all 3 of my heroes in order to clear Leaping Fish on round 1. That would be my recommendation if you're struggling with this quest, is to focus on getting off to a very strong start, the strongest start possible, in order to clear the Leaping Fish as soon as possible. And after the Leaping Fish is cleared, you can set up at your relative leisure. Clear the staging area, establish a strong board state, and a stable board state, and then when you're ready, move into Phase 3 and quest for 15. You cannot linger too much, because if you're over 40, you have to be worried about the Umbar Assassin, though it's only a 1 in 30 chance. And you may know already at that point in the game whether the Umbar Assassin is going to come out or not, if you've seen him as a shadow card. He's definitely a card to keep an eye on, and he doesn't have a shadow effect. So you're always going to be happy when the Umbar Assassin is a shadow card, as you won't have to deal with him later in the game. So, if you're struggling, more power early would be my recommendation. And once you get the early wall out of the way, that's the majority of the difficulty in this quest, as long as you proceed at a reasonable pace and aren't at too high a threat in the final phase, and you do need some luck, because there's some nasty enemies that can come out in Phase 3, so you want to proceed through Phase 3 as quickly as possible and not hang around, which is why it's important to establish your stable board state before you get to Phase 3 and not try to blitz the quest. You can do it, but it's risky. So you establish your stable board state in turn 1 and 2, which means clearing the enemies off the board, and establishing a board state capable of making 15 regular questing progress, willpower progress, in relatively short order, preferably 1 or 2 turns. And that will defeat the quest. The next 2 quests have greater challenge for sure. This one not too bad, and because it's introducing the battle mechanic, which is brand new. So I imagine that's the reason for it being the easiest of the expansion quests, but still not easy for sure. Definitely harder than a lot of quests in the Shadows of Mirkwood or Dwaro Delph cycle. So thanks for watching.